Hi, today I'm going to show you how to fill in the child general passport application for a Canadian passport. The form I'm going to use is the Child Abroad General Passport Application for Canadians under 16 years of age applying outside of Canada and from the USA. Although this form is slightly different because of the sections pertaining mainly to the guarantor. If you are within Canada, you are still able to see this instructional video, and it will still benefit you greatly when applying for a Canadian passport even within Canada. And be sure to stay until the end of the video where I'll share some extra hints and tips about the child passport application form and making sure it's successful first time round. So section 1, child's personal information. So in the surname field, the best way to tackle this application is to make sure you have your child's either Canadian birth certificate or their Canadian citizenship certificate if they were born outside of Canada. Those two documents are going to be key in ensuring that you can actually get a passport in the first place. So the surname will appear as it does in the child's Canadian birth certificate, or again, if the child was born outside of Canada, the Canadian citizenship certificate is what the personal information will be based on. So how the name appears in the citizenship certificate is how it will be appearing on the passport as well. So it has to be as per that. So it's either per the Canadian birth certificate if the child is born in Canada, or if your child is born outside of Canada and you have the Canadian citizenship certificate, that's how the child's names will appear on the actual passport, and that's how you'll list them on this application form. So surname will appear. For example, if it's a double barrel surname, you have to put both surnames in. You can't just pick one or the other, it has to be both. And then given names as well, same thing. So if you've got just one name, that's fine, first name, but if you have middle names as well, you have to enter them as well. There's no delineations, and you have to again make sure verbatim the names that appear in the Canadian birth certificate or the Canadian citizenship certificate are exactly how they're going to appear on the passport. Okay, that's a major key in making sure that the application is successful first and foremost. And then obviously you have these other sections here as well. So surname, so last name at birth. If the child's surname was different at their birth, you'll put that into this field here as well. If it's obviously subsequently different now and it appears differently on a citizenship certificate, for example, that name will appear here. And any former surnames that the child may have had. Place of birth is what you'll put here, so it will be the city. So for example, it could be Ottawa, Toronto, Hamilton, be London, Canada, could be London, UK, but that's the city will go into this field. And then the country, you can use the drop down list to find the corresponding countries, so Canada, United States of America, and so on and so forth. Next up, looking at the either again the Canadian birth certificate or the Canadian citizenship certificate, you'll put down the date of birth as it appears in one of those two documents, and then of course the gender, female or male. The natural eye color of the child, sometimes it varies depending on how young the child is. I think most kids end up having blue eyes when they're first born, and then they eventually, I think, morph into their natural eye color. But you can put it down if it's still a very newborn baby. You can just kind of pick what it is at the time of obviously when you're filling the application in. Of course, children are obviously growing and maturing, so just put it in as it is right now. That's all you can do really. Same thing with height as well. Just put in the height as of right now, or as you're filling in the application form. And then down here, current home address. So you list the address where you reside at currently, or the child is currently, excuse me. That's where you put the address. That's the address to put in this field, current home address. And then mailing address you would fill in if it is any different from the home address. And then rounding up section 1, it says here there's a signature strip here, but there's very important information that you need to take heed of. So here it is. Children 11 years of age or over must sign in this signature box. Note, at no time should a person other than the child sign in this signature box without exception. Basically meaning if your child is 11 years old or over, they will sign inside this box. Of course, beware of this border. Do not stray outside of it. Make sure that your child signs within it. Maybe a bit more tricky, but maybe have them sign on a piece of paper just to get the signature down right. Make sure the size is correct, and then they can put the finished product inside of this box. And obviously, not to forget to date and sign. So city. So again, Toronto or Ottawa, Winnipeg, London, UK, wherever it may be, city and country, and that rounds out section 1. Okay, so section 2, information on applicant. So what this is, section 2 is referring to when it talks about the applicant. It means the applicant parent, because obviously the child, any child under 16, their applicant parent will be filling this form in for the child. It's not the child that fills it in. They can only start filling in applications once they become 16 or older, and then they'll have their own adult general application to fill in. For now, what happens is that both the parents are designated roles in this application process. So one parent will be deemed the applicant parent, and that could be seen here on the left hand side, which we'll get down to in just a moment, and then the other parent is obviously the other parent. So that's what happens in section 2. This section can really catch a lot of people out, and they can get quite confused, so I'm looking to really break down a lot of the jargon and some of the wording here, which can lead to a lot of confusion, and make it as simplistic as possible. So hopefully section 2 I'll clarify a lot of things for you. Okay, so first of all, you're greeted with some questions here that you must answer. You cannot leave these blank. If you leave them blank, it's going to most probably lead to your application being rejected, or being for sure delayed if you need to be contacted for further information. So do not miss out these sections. They're absolutely pivotal to the child's passport application. So the first question you're greeted with is the child currently the subject of an adoption process, or partially or fully in the care of a family services organization? So you must tick no or yes. And please be advised, if you tick yes, then include all documents pertaining to the adoption process. Don't leave anything out. Just provide all documentation pertaining to the adoption process. And then the second question is, are there any separation agreements, court orders, or legal proceedings pertaining to custody of, mobility of, or access to the child? Once again, you tick either no or yes. And again, if it's yes, you're going to provide all of these documentations that you may have received from the courts. It can vary from country to country. Sometimes a legal agreement may not be enforced, and it might just be between both parents, but court orders are generally issued in most countries, and you are required to provide all documents pertaining to custody and mobility or access to the child. These are really important parts of the application. Even if both your answers are no, don't just think yeah it's no and just move on. Please tick no or yes and action accordingly. And just below that, this is a section that catches a lot of people out. I think the wording catches a lot of people out, but if you just break it down, it's not too difficult to ascertain, and there is a drop down list here as well. Okay, so a relationship between the applicant. Again, if you get rid of this bracket and just read it like this: relationship between the applicant parent or legal guardian and the other parent or legal guardian. So it's not talking about the applicant as in the child, who obviously you're right to think is the applicant, but when it's a child, it's actually the applicant parent and then the other parent. And from here, if you look at the drop down list, if you're filling it in online, it is much more helpful. So we're just talking about the relationship between the mother and the father of the child. Put it down that way. So are they single? So is there no sort of marriage going on here? If they've just never been married and they're no longer together, so it'll be single. So applicant parent is no longer actually in a relationship with the other parent, so then obviously the applicant parent is single. Common law, so applicant parent and other parent are in a relationship where they're living at the same address, but they are not married or haven't entered any civil partnerships, for example. Married, so obviously applicant parent and other parent have gotten married, and they've got the documentation to prove it, as well as the date of marriage if applicable. So if you're married, you're going to be filling in this section with your marriage date. Okay. Then separated, so you put separated here if the applicant parent and the other parent are separated and may potentially be living apart. Sometimes you might not even be living apart, maybe still be living in the same address, but at this current situation, what's going on in the relationship? If it's separated, you put that down. Okay. And then divorced, so if there's a divorced, again, you'll still put date of marriage here in this section, as you would have done with married and separated. if you're separated but still married. You could obviously be common law and separated as well, for example. Divorced, just putting down divorced here, and obviously just the date of marriage will still go here. It is still applicable, so don't ignore that. Just because you're divorced now doesn't mean obviously you weren't married at a certain time, so you have to put the date of marriage there. And then finally widowed, so obviously if one of the parents has passed away, then obviously that is the status for the relationship between the parents as of right now. And again, if you were married, you will still put the date of marriage as it's still applicable. So again, breaking it down, these two sections here, it can get a bit fiddly and it can get a bit confusing, but I'm hoping to really clarify this section between applicant parent and other parent and make it a bit more straightforward process. Again, what I think the best thing to do is get rid of these brackets because they cause more of a confusion than actually helping anything. So how you want to read it is applicant parent or legal guardian, but we'll just treat it as applicant parent, and then this one other parent, so that's fine. So we've got let's say mum is here, and then dad can be here, and then a mum and dad can fill in their information as they see fit and as is correct. So for example, surname, last name at your birth. This is obviously taking into account that mum could be here and dad could be here, or dad could be here and mum could be here. And what happens is obviously if a marriage has occurred and then, for example, the husband or wife has changed their name to their spouse's surname, it will obviously be different to their name at birth. So one of the keys here is to make sure, or if a name change has occurred as well. So maybe if one of the parents was either adopted after their birth, or maybe they were taken in, had a stepfather or stepmother and took on their name subsequently, or even just had a name change, a legal name change. So what you want to do, just read this information really clearly as it states surname, or also known as last name at your birth. So it has to be your name at birth, or it can also be seen as maiden name as well, which is a much more classical term for that as well. But basically your surname at your birth, okay? And then given name, so please include all first and middle names as well. Don't leave out any middle names, even if you're not using them day-to-day life. Given names, it has the S in brackets there as well, so it's giving you the space for that as well. Of course, your date of birth and your country of birth goes down here. Helpfully, it has the drop down list as well, so you can just pick the country of birth. And then your current address here, this is the address where you currently reside, so current home address goes into this section for both individuals. And then a telephone number has to be provided as well, so a daytime telephone number, maybe home, cell phone or work, where you can be contacted. And I always recommend always putting an email address in, because it's sometimes really helpful just to get in touch. You know, it's more of a preferable form of contact these days with many offices, so definitely provide one. If you're maybe just working all day and you can't answer your phone, for example, an email might be another really great way for people to get in touch with you, or to trade back and forth documentation that may be required subsequently. And very finally here, for both parents, there will be the signature strip. So once again, the signature of the applicant. So again, read it as signature of applicant parent. Okay, so that's whoever you decide to be the applicant parent is on this side. They sign, they date, and they signed at. So for example, signed at would be Toronto, Canada. It could be Ottawa, Canada. It could be London, United Kingdom. It could be Los Angeles, California, USA. Wherever you are at when you sign this, basically we just want the city and country is what we're looking for here, okay? It doesn't give you much space, granted, but maybe just write it on top and then just put it downwards if need be. And then the same thing the other parent will do as well. One real big tip I will give you is, as we'll see as we go further on into the application, onto page 2, but one thing I would highly suggest, if both parents are Canadian citizens, they both are Canadian passport holders, either one can be the applicant parent, and then the other one can be the other parent. However, I would strongly suggest that, especially if you're applying maybe outside of Canada, where only one of the parents is a Canadian citizen, for example, I would actually recommend that the non-Canadian parent, obviously if the parents are still married or still in a common law relationship, there's no separation or anything, all three parties, that is the mother, the father and the applicant child, are all residing at the same address, then I would recommend that the non-Canadian citizen parent is actually the applicant parent. Most people think that to be the applicant parent you have to be the Canadian citizen parent. This is not true. Basically, the applicant parent is just really filling in the application form on behalf of the child, because obviously the child is too young to fill in the application form for themselves. And why I'm informing you of this is it will be revealed much later on when we get to the guarantor section as well. But for example, if you are in a relationship and only one of the parents is a Canadian citizen, have the Canadian citizen parent become the other parent. Okay, so the Canadian citizen is the other parent, and then the non-Canadian should be the applicant parent. And I'll reveal why, and this will save you a great deal of time and running around and having to involve third parties. It's going to make life really, really simple. Obviously, if this is in Canada and both parents are Canadian citizens, either one can be applicant parent, other parent. Really a straightforward process. But if it's a situation where only one of the parents is a Canadian citizen, for example, through naturalization, and the other parent hasn't become Canadian yet, or is maybe just a permanent resident, or if you're applying outside of Canada and the USA, again, non-Canadian citizen parent will be the applicant parent, and then the Canadian citizen parent will be the other parent on this side. Right, so we're now at section 3, previous Canadian travel document. So this is a really straightforward section of the application, so we'll run through it fairly quickly. And basically, has a Canadian travel document, passport, certificate of identity, or refugee travel document been issued to the child? So what we're mainly interested in is passport. So if the child has ever had a Canadian passport, it could be still valid, it could be one that expired 5-10 years ago. If it has been issued, it's going to greatly be of help when processing the application form. So if so, hit yes, and then you just fill in the Canadian passport number in this field and the date of issue. So this is all available in the bio page. That's the page with the child's photo on it with all the details, so the name and the date of birth, and that's where you'll find this information. So the passport number, which is on top right hand corner of page 3, and then the date of issue, which is within the main body of the bio data, should be just under the name field there. And then if the Canadian travel document is still valid, you must include it with your application. So if you still have a valid Canadian passport, you must include it with this application, because that passport will have to be cancelled and snipped before a brand new passport can be issued to you. Obviously, you'll get the old passport back because it asks you about it. Would you like the previous passport returned to you? If not, it will be securely destroyed by the passport program to protect the child's personal information. So you just hit yes, please return it to me. I would like it as a keepsake. And then obviously there's a little bit of a note here regarding the current passport if one was issued previously. So if a valid Canadian travel document has been lost, stolen, damaged, or is inaccessible, complete form PPTC 203, which is the declaration concerning a lost, stolen, inaccessible, damaged, or found Canadian travel document. A Canadian travel document once reported lost or stolen is no longer valid. And be advised, when a lost or stolen passport occurs, there is going to be an administrative fee, which at the moment is around about the $45 mark outside of Canada. But for sure, check out section D of the instructions, depending on what form you've picked up, and that will highlight the exact price that you may have to pay if your current Canadian passport is lost or stolen. Section 4, Proof of Canadian Citizenship. A really small section, but it's really key to the entire passport process, and it really will pay off to make sure that you fill this section in correctly and provide the requisite documentation with the application form. So provide one of the documents listed below, and the key here is original only. Do not make copies or certified copies and provide them in the application. With the child general application, you have to provide their proof of Canadian citizenship, the original, every single time. Okay, so that's really, really important. If you don't provide the original, that's just going to be an automatic rejection, and you're going to get your documents back either in the mail or back in person if you submit them in person and don't have them on your person to give to the officers. So if the child was born in Canada, see, to be completed, if the child was born in Canada, you will provide their Canadian birth certificate. Okay, so you hit that, and then you would fill in this section here, registration number. So registration number appears on the Canadian birth certificate. The Canadian birth certificate can vary quite a bit in terms of the sizes depending on which province has issued it, but it's very overtly listed as a registration number on the birth certificate. I would recommend whenever you provide the Canadian birth certificate during this processing of your passport, please provide the long form birth certificate. That's the birth certificate which is going to be a bit more larger, and it's going to have both parents' details on it, so that will just assist in processing the passport smoothly. For sure, you'd have to provide the long form birth certificate, the Canadian birth certificate, if this is a first time passport application, but it can always make things a bit more smoother because the passport office may not have to then contact you asking for it if they do want to see it for whatever reason. So you put the registration number here, and then you put the date of issue here. Both registration number and date of issue will be found on the front of the birth certificate. Just have a quick scour and you'll see them clearly defined as date of issue and registration number on the birth certificates of the province where the child was born. Now, if the child was born outside of Canada, they will not be issued, of course, a Canadian birth certificate. They will be, of course, issued a birth certificate, but it won't be a Canadian one, and that's not what you would use as proof of Canadian citizenship. So, if the child is born outside of Canada, you will, of course, have to obtain a certificate of Canadian citizenship first, and only once it's in your possession are you able to apply for a Canadian passport for the child. So the Canadian citizenship certificate also has a certificate number which is very clearly defined. Depending on when your child was born and when the certificate was issued, it will either be a wallet-sized, dual-sided, laminated card with the child's photo on it and their name and date of birth and eye color and height, and it will have a certificate number in red. And post 2012 those cards have been replaced, and now an A4 cream colored dual-sided paper certificate is issued, but regardless, the certificate number is called the certificate number on both documents and is very easy to find. And also the date of issue or effective date of citizenship. So the date of issue is on the pre-2012 citizenship certificates, which are the current citizenship certificates. So if you're issued a citizenship certificate card, then the date of issue might either just appear as a year, for example 1999 for example, or it will be month and year. It will never be a day, month and year. So you either just have a year on the front of the card, or it will be 03 2002 for example. So just put it as verbatim it appears on the card. So even if you just get the year, you can just put the year, that's fine. And an effective date of citizenship is regarding the 2012 citizenship certificate and onwards, the current citizenship certificate, which is again the A4 sheet of paper, and that is visible on actually both front and back, and it is actually called the effective date of citizenship. Section 5, Declaration of Applicant. Again, this section can really trip some people up because they may have filled in Section 2 inaccurately, and it just snowballs from there. To make it really easy, we're going to scroll up here. So the parent that has filled in this section here, applicant parent side, is going to fill in Section 5, Declaration of Applicant. Okay, so, and this is regarding the applicant parent. So applicant parent surname goes here, and that's the current surname. So for example, if it's mum, she's going to put her spousal surname if she did indeed take on the spousal surname, for example. So current surname here, the given name or given names of the applicant parent here, and then relationship to the child. So it's either going to be mother or father. And then here you put surname of the child, okay, surname of the child, and then given names of child. It's really important to read the declaration and know exactly what you're going to be signing off. Have a really detailed read and make sure you digest all this information. And then applicant parent will be signing here. They will date when they signed here, and then they will put the city and country they were in when signed. Section 6, Declaration of Guarantor. So this can be filled in by a couple of people. When I gave some advice in section 2 about making the non-Canadian citizen parent the applicant, and then making the Canadian citizen parent the other parent, this is because the other parent can actually fill in the declaration of guarantor using a valid Canadian passport. So that's really key, and really that means everything can be done in-house, literally. No third parties are required. So for example, we don't need to get a doctor or dentist, for example, to fill it in, taking the time out of your day, taking the time out of their day and filling it in, and having them sign photos and running around looking for people when it best suits them. This can be really a simplistic method that a lot of people kind of rule out or don't even know about at all, thinking that they're too close to a relation. Nope. If one of the Canadian parents, one of the parents is a Canadian citizen and holds a valid Canadian passport, they will be the other parent in section 2, and then they fill in the section 6 declaration of guarantor, because they are guarantoring the applicant parent here, section 5. Okay, so what I would do is, if you're holding a valid Canadian passport and that's how you're going to fill in this application, have your Canadian passport in front of you and verbatim put in the names as they appear in your Canadian passport. So same surnames, same given names, including middle names if they appear in your Canadian passport. Then here it asks you for 2 fields: Canadian passport number, so this is where you put your Canadian passport number, and then here it will ask you for date of birth in your Canadian passport. Okay, not just any passport, Canadian passport. Okay, so you put the date of birth again, verbatim. You'll just copy things over. However, if neither of the parents are Canadian passport holders, or if they don't hold a Canadian passport which is currently valid or has been expired for more than 1 year, you can get obviously a third party individual that can either be anyone else that holds a valid Canadian passport. So you could use siblings of either of the parents maybe, or good friends of them, as long as the guarantor must know the applicant identified in section 5. Okay, so it's whoever knows this person. Obviously if it's a parent that holds a valid Canadian passport, they're going to know the other parent as long as they've known him for 2 years or more. But if you look for someone that's occupation based, which is another criteria, they will fill in a different amount of information in these sections here. So if it's an occupation based guarantor, and there's an exhaustive list here in the instructions section M to B, but basically a medical doctor, a dentist, a police officer, pharmacist, lawyer, for example, those are occupations that are eligible. They will put in here medical doctor, they will put in lawyer or pharmacist. They will then put their telephone numbers here as well. These are going to be filled in. These telephone fields are going to be filled in regardless of whether you're a Canadian passport holder guarantor or if you're an occupation-based guarantor. Those obviously you still have to provide a telephone number, because the guarantor will be contacted to confirm that they signed the forms and on the back of the child's photo. And then something that trips up a lot of people as well, especially if they're a occupation-based guarantor, is they read this. Again, this is not very well worded because it just says date of birth in passport. Really, it's only for Canadian passport holders. So if you're an occupation-based guarantor, you do not provide your date of birth. You simply put the name of your firm or organization where you work. So for example, if you're a lawyer, you put the law firm here. If you're a medical doctor, you put the hospital or the general practice where you operate out of from here, or the pharmacists, or the police station where you operate out of if you're a police officer. And then you put, again, in this address field, it's split. So if you're a Canadian passport holder guarantor, you're going to put your current home address, okay? And if you're a occupation-based guarantor, you will put your business address. And then finally, the guarantor lists the full name of applicant. Remember, take away these brackets and make it really easy. So you're going to put the guarantor is going to put the full name of this person here that's filled in this section. So either one of the parents that was the applicant parent, they put their full name here. Full name of applicant parent. Okay, and then they put the full name of the child that is listed in section 1. Then the guarantor finally will read this declaration, digest it, and understand what they're agreeing to and what they've signed off, and they will then list that I have known the applicant parent. Okay, again, it's giving you the clue here. It's just giving you this bracket, which makes things a bit more confusing. So this is how you want to read it. I, the guarantor, have known the applicant parent for a number of years, and the guarantor has to have known applicant parent for 2 years or more in order for the guarantor to qualify. Finally, the guarantor will sign here. They'll date when they signed, and then they'll put again the city and country where they were when they signed. And finally, section 7, emergency contact information. Note the use of the term optional. This does not have to be filled in for your application to be successful. However, I would always advise providing it, especially when a passport application is being lodged, in case of any emergencies that occur, especially when it's pertaining to children. It's really handy to have contact details of someone that does not normally travel with the child, because it can really help out if things go awry. So again, you want to list someone here. It's usually I guess grandparents or aunts or uncles that don't normally travel with the child but can be contacted in the worst case scenario, and that would then round out the application process for the child abroad general passport application form. But again, this can be used to assist you if you're applying within Canada or the USA. And now some tips that can be really handy in making sure that your application is successful. First of all, if you're applying for your child's very first Canadian passport, you have to provide some other information that isn't really clearly outlined, unfortunately, in a lot of material provided, but it's really important, and it can really stop delays and potential rejection. So if it's a first time Canadian passport application, you have to provide the original long form birth certificate. So if the child was born in Canada, it will be the Canadian birth certificate, and that will then satisfy 2 documents in one. So it provides the child's proof of citizenship, of course, but also it is a long form birth certificate because it provides the names of both parents on it. If, for example, the child was born outside of Canada, you would then be providing 2 documents. One would be the proof of citizenship, so that would be the citizenship certificate, as well as the original long form birth certificate. So for example, a UK long form birth certificate is about A4 size and is green, and it lists both parents' names and occupations and addresses. So that has to be provided with the first time child's application form, and it has to be the original documentation. And again, if it's a first time application for a child, you also need to provide copies of valid signature ID for both parents. So this can be, for example, valid passports or driving licenses are the most common choices. This is really just to ensure, because it's a first time child's passport application, there's no details on record of who are the parents of the child. This is just a brand new application, and this is just to make sure that safeguards are in place, that the people that are applying in section 2 have the right to be applying, and this works in tandem with the application form, the long form birth certificate, and then the ID, all piece together information that can then show that the people listed on this form are the parents and they have the right to apply for the child's passport. Of course, in this day and age, it's very welcome that these safeguards are in place, and it's unfortunately necessary when it comes to children's passports. But those 2 things, so again, it can just be copies of passports or driving licenses. Any valid signature ID should be provided with a first time passport application. But they can just be really just standard photocopies. You don't have to provide original documents, nor do you have to provide certified copies. Just copies will suffice. And of course, If it's a first time passport for a child, you provide the original long form birth certificate. So I hope this guide helped you in filling in the child general passport application. Please leave a like, please comment, please share, and please subscribe for future videos. And if you know anyone else that is struggling with filling this form in, why not send it their way and help them out as well. Thanks very much for watching.